Hello, everyone. My name is Ava, and today I want to share my story about heartbreak, betrayal, and a wedding speech that changed everything. This is a story about family, love, jealousy, and secrets. It all began with my older sister, whom I always trusted. But one day, she did something that left me speechless. She stole my fiancé and told me I would never be good enough. I felt my whole life was shattered. Yet, at their wedding, I gave a speech that made her regret everything. She thought she knew it all, but in the end, her smile vanished, and she whispered, "How did you know this?" Let me start from the beginning. I grew up in a small town with my parents and my older sister, Sarah. Sarah was everything I was not. She was charming, confident, and always caught people's eyes. As a child, I was quiet, shy, and often felt invisible. My parents loved us both, but they could not help giving more attention to Sarah. She got better grades, she won more medals, and she was captain of the volleyball team. Sometimes I felt like I lived in her shadow, but despite all that, I loved her very much. I believed we were best friends. When we were kids, Sarah and I shared everything. We played with the same dolls, watched the same shows, and told each other secrets at night. I remember one time I fell off my bicycle and hurt my knee really badly. Sarah ran home, got our parents, and insisted that they drive me to the clinic. She looked after me and helped me walk when I could not stand on my own. This made me believe she would always protect me. I never thought she would be the one to break my heart. As we grew older, things began to change. Sarah became more popular in high school. She started going out with friends, while I stayed home reading books and listening to music. She had many admirers, both boys and girls, who wanted to be her friend or her partner in school dances. I, on the other hand, had a small circle of friends. People did not notice me much because I acted shy and rarely spoke up in class. But I was still okay with it. At that time, I was happy to have my own interests and my small group of loyal friends. When I turned 18, I moved away to attend a college in another city. Sarah stayed closer to home, choosing a local college. She stayed near our parents and continued her social life. We did not see each other often, but we called and texted once in a while. Whenever I came home for holidays, she was always excited to share news about her life. She would talk for hours about her friends, her fun adventures, and her plans. During those times, I mostly listened. I rarely got a moment to share my own tales, but I did not mind. I thought that was how our relationship worked. Sarah was the star, and I was the quieter sister. In my second year of college, I met a wonderful guy named James. He was kind, caring, and made me laugh every day. We both studied business, so we would do homework together, grab coffee in between classes, and slowly get to know each other. Before long, we were a couple. James was my first serious boyfriend. I was nervous but very happy. He treated me with respect and often said he felt lucky to have me in his life. One day, during a college break, I decided to bring James to my parents' house so he could meet my family. I was thrilled to introduce him to Sarah. I thought my sister would love him. However, Sarah's reaction to James was strange. She was polite at first, but I saw something in her eyes. It was a mixture of envy and curiosity. She asked him many questions about himself, his hobbies, and his career goals. It felt like she wanted to know everything about him, which at the time I thought was normal. She tried to be friendly, yet it seemed like she was studying him, not simply getting to know him. As James and I continued to date, we sometimes visited my family on special occasions. Sarah always made a point to talk to James alone. She asked him for advice on her projects and told him about her ambitions. I tried not to worry. I trusted both James and Sarah. I had no clue that she was slowly planting seeds of doubt. Later, I found out she would say small, negative things about me in front of him, like, "Ava can be so insecure," or "Ava does not handle stress well, does she?" At the time, James did not mention any of this to me because he wanted to keep the peace. He assumed she was just worried about me. A year later, James proposed. He got down on one knee, during a weekend getaway by a beautiful lake. I felt so happy I cried for hours. I said yes immediately. I loved him more than anything, and I wanted to spend the rest of my life with him. Sarah flew out to see me the next day, bringing flowers and a bottle of champagne. She gave me a hug and congratulated me, but again, I sensed something in her expression, something that did not feel quite right. Yet, I decided to ignore it. I was too excited to start wedding preparations. I spent the next several months planning the wedding. I trusted Sarah to help as my maid of honor. She stayed by my side, asked me questions about my vision for the wedding, took me to dress fittings, and even organized a small engagement party. Meanwhile, James was busy at work, so I usually updated him by phone or text. He always told me he was grateful for Sarah's help. He thought it was sweet of her to join me in planning. Then, out of nowhere, everything fell apart. About 3 months before the wedding, James started acting distant. He stopped returning my calls quickly, canceled dates, and often said he was busy. I felt confused and scared. I tried talking to him, but he gave short answers, saying, "I'm stressed at work." During this time, I also noticed Sarah was traveling more, always making excuses like, "I have a business trip." My parents believed her because she had told them she was seeking a better job in a nearby city. One night, I drove to James's apartment, hoping to surprise him with a home-cooked meal. I knocked on the door, but nobody answered. The lights were off, and his car was missing. I decided to call him, but he did not pick up. Feeling uneasy, I waited in my car for nearly an hour, eventually deciding he must be held up at work. As I drove away, I saw a familiar car pulling into the parking lot. My sister's car. My heart skipped a beat. Why was Sarah there? I did not stick around. I was too scared to find out. The next day, James came to see me. His face was pale and tense. Instead of giving me a hug, he looked down and said he felt guilty. My heart pounded so hard, I thought my chest would burst. He told me that recently he realized he and I were not as compatible as he had hoped. He said he could not marry me and that we should call off the wedding. I was in shock, shaking, tears streaming down my face. I tried to ask why, but he gave no clear reason. He mumbled something about us not matching on life goals. I felt like I was floating outside my body, watching the scene from afar. I did not even have the energy to fight. For a week, I stayed in bed, crying and feeling numb. I could not eat or sleep properly. The invitations were already sent out, the venue was booked, and the dress was nearly complete. Then, about 2 weeks after the breakup, I got a short text from Sarah. "I have something to tell you." I called her, and she confessed she had feelings for James. She said they had been talking behind my back for a while, and he was now living with her. "I just wanted you to know," she said. My entire world collapsed. I felt betrayed, angry, and heartbroken. My own sister had taken the man I was engaged to marry. Even worse, she said, "I guess he realized you'd never be good enough for him." I spent the next few months trying to pick up the pieces of my life. My parents were furious at Sarah. They argued with her constantly, but Sarah ignored them. She posted pictures online with James, smiling and looking happy. Eventually, I blocked her on social media because it hurt too much to see. Meanwhile, I went to therapy, found comfort in my friends, and tried to rebuild my life as best as I could. I did not imagine anything else would happen between Sarah and James. Yet, about a year later, I received a wedding invitation in the mail. Sarah and James were getting married. Seeing that invitation felt like a dagger to the heart. They had included a cheesy photo of them hugging and smiling. The card read, "We hope you can join us as we start our lives together. Your presence would be a blessing." My first impulse was to shred it and toss it away, but a part of me wanted to face them. I had so much I wanted to say. My mind flashed back to the hurtful words Sarah used. "You'll never be good enough." That phrase stuck in my head day and night. I decided I would go, not to celebrate, but to show them that I was stronger than they believed. I told my parents I planned to attend. They hesitated but understood. They were also invited, even though they were not on the best terms with Sarah. They asked if I was sure I wanted to go. I said yes. Inside, I carried pain, sorrow, and a longing for closure. I kept telling myself, I want them to see me. I want them to know they did not break me forever. The day before the wedding, Sarah called me. She said, I heard you're coming. Are you okay with everything? I don't want any drama. Her voice sounded so cold. She did not apologize or express any guilt. She only wanted to control how things went. I kept the conversation short. I will be there. Don't worry about me. Truthfully, I felt very nervous. How would I handle seeing James in a suit, smiling at the altar as he waited for my sister? How would I watch them exchange vows, knowing that I once stood exactly where she stood now? But I pushed on, deciding I would keep my composure, no matter what. When I arrived at the wedding venue, I felt a wave of sadness and nostalgia. The building was beautiful, decorated with white flowers and gentle lights. It reminded me of the setup Sarah had helped me plan for my own canceled wedding. An outdoor area with a lovely arch, rows of chairs for the guests, and a long aisle leading to the front. The sun was shining, the air felt warm, and music played softly as guests arrived. Many people I had not seen in ages came up to greet me. Some of them looked surprised that I was there. They probably knew the story. I took my seat in one of the back rows, trying not to draw attention. Soft whispers traveled through the crowd. I could guess they were talking about me. People glanced my way, likely wondering how I was feeling, but I kept a neutral face, focusing on my breathing. My parents arrived too, sitting calmly beside me. Soon, the music changed, and the officiant stood at the front. James walked in, dressed in a dark gray suit, looking very handsome. His eyes scanned the crowd, then landed on me for a moment. I saw a flicker of guilt pass through them, but he quickly looked away. Then Sarah appeared, wearing a white lace gown. She walked slowly down the aisle, smiling from ear to ear. She looked radiant and proud, but when her gaze drifted over the seats, she paused for a moment, noticing me. She gave a small smile, which did not seem genuine. Perhaps it was just for show. The ceremony was short. The officiant spoke about love, commitment, and family. I wonder if Sarah felt even a drop of shame as she listened. They exchanged vows, placed rings on each other's fingers, and sealed it with a kiss. Everyone clapped. I clapped too, but softly, more as a gesture than genuine approval. After the ceremony, people moved into the reception hall. There were elegant tables with flower centerpieces, a big dance floor, and a small stage with a microphone. Dinner began, but I could hardly taste my food because of my swirling emotions. I was ready to leave, thinking I had done my part just by showing up. Then the DJ announced that the newlyweds would be having some toasts. The best man, a friend of James, went first. He talked about how James was a loyal friend and how he admired Sarah. I felt my stomach twist, remembering how loyal James had been until my sister walked into his life. Next, the maid of honor, Sarah's friend from college, stood up. She praised Sarah's kindness and said how wonderful it was to see James and Sarah together. The whole time, I tried to keep my face blank, focusing on my water glass. Then, out of nowhere, Sarah picked up the mic and said, I'd like to invite my sister, Ava, to say a few words, since she's here, and after all, she's family. Everyone turned to me. My heart started pounding. This was not planned. I had no speech prepared. But maybe Sarah thought putting me on the spot would make me squirm. She gave me a smug little smirk, possibly thinking I would blush, stammer, or run away. However, I felt a sudden surge of strength. Maybe I had no official speech planned, but I had something to say. I stood up, walked to the front, took the mic in my hands, and faced the crowd. I started off quiet, but the room went hush. Everyone could hear me clearly. Thank you, I said, looking straight at Sarah. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak, and congratulations on your wedding. I could sense her surprise that I did not break down. Some of you may know me as Sarah's younger sister. Others may know I used to be engaged to James. It's not a secret. A wave of whispers filled the room, but I continued calmly. Yes, I was supposed to marry him, and things did not work out. Instead, I stand here today as a guest at his new wedding, to my sister. The tension in the room was thick, but I pushed forward. I took a deep breath and told the guests a little about my childhood with Sarah. I did not lie or insult her. I simply said, Sarah has always been the shining star in our family. She excelled at many things, and I admired her greatly. I still remember how she once rescued me when I fell off my bike, carried me home, and made sure my knee was properly looked after. That day, she was my hero. Sarah's face softened for a moment, probably remembering that incident. Maybe she thought I was about to say something nice for the rest of the speech, but that was just the beginning. Then, I gently introduced the topic of betrayal. I said, but life sometimes takes turns we never expect. I thought Sarah would always be on my side, that she would never hurt me. I was wrong. Sometimes, family is exactly who hurts you the worst. I felt blindsided when Sarah and James chose each other. I lost not only a fiancé, but also the sister I adored. For months, I felt worthless. Sarah told me I'd never be good enough, and I almost started believing it. A hush fell over the entire crowd. People stared, some with sadness, some with shock. I continued, but being good enough doesn't come from someone else's opinion. It comes from within. Over time, I got back on my feet. I went to therapy, focused on my career, and found out that I am stronger than I knew. I would like to thank Sarah and James for teaching me this lesson. I do not need anyone's approval to feel worthy. I paused for a moment, letting my words sink in. By now, Sarah's smug expression was gone. Her smile had faded, replaced by an unsettled look. She tried to laugh once or twice to make it seem like everything was fine, but no one was laughing with her. People listened intently to every word I said. Then, I dropped the part about the secret I had learned. Over this past year, I learned a few things about James that he might have hidden from Sarah, I said calmly. The room gripped their seats, and Sarah's face went pale. James looked nervous. I could see him shift in his chair, adjusting his tie. I spun around to face James and continued. James, remember that small investment fund in your name? The one you told me about, but said you never shared with Sarah? The one that might come with, well, a lot of risk? You once swore me to secrecy, but I think it's only fair your wife knows. A few guests gasped. James tried to stand, but I signaled him to wait. I'm not saying this to ruin your wedding day. I'm saying it because marriage is built on honesty. Sarah, please be aware of the decisions James has made with his money, because they are now also your decisions. A collective hush filled the hall. Even the servers were standing still, plates in hand, listening. Then I turned back to Sarah. My voice was calm but firm. You asked me to speak, so here I am. I don't want revenge. I do not need to see you suffer. But I think you both need to realize that actions have consequences, and secrets can destroy lives. I hope that one day, you might understand the pain you caused me. Yet, I also hope you will find honesty and loyalty in your marriage. Because if you don't, this betrayal will repeat itself. I finished by saying, I know you told me I'd never be good enough. But I am. I am good enough for myself, and that is all that matters. Then, I looked around the room, told everyone, thank you for listening, and gracefully handed the microphone back to the DJ. Silence hung in the air for a moment. People were stunned. Slowly, a few of them began to clap. Not loud, cheerful applause, but more of an, I recognize your courage, kind of applause. I walked back to my seat beside my parents, who both reached out to give me a comforting squeeze of my hand. My heart was pounding, but I felt a wave of relief. I had finally said what I needed to say. Sarah still stood frozen near the wedding cake. Her cheeks went bright red, and she looked at James accusingly. James stared down at his feet, not sure how to respond. Their perfect wedding moment now felt awkward. I saw Sarah lean over to James, mouth trembling. She whispered something to him. From where I sat, it looked like she said, "How did she know this?" It was the exact phrase I had heard as I walked past them on my way out of the hall. How did you know this? That was the final confirmation that my words had hit their mark. I left soon after my speech. I walked out of the reception hall, head held high. My parents followed. We got in the car, and as we drove away, I let out a deep breath I had been holding for so long. I glanced at my reflection in the window and realized I did not feel pain anymore. Yes, the wounds still existed, but they were healing. I felt a sense of freedom, as though I had finally taken my power back. For too long, Sarah had overshadowed me. For too long, she had made me doubt my worth. But that day, I stood up for myself in front of everyone. I told the truth and reminded her that a person she thought was never good enough was now the one who had the courage to speak the truth. In the weeks that followed, I heard bits and pieces about Sarah and James's struggles. Word got out that James had been secretive about a large sum of money invested in questionable ventures. Sarah confronted him, and they had big arguments. Some said they even considered a post-nuptial agreement or something like that. I tried not to get too involved in their business. After all, it was no longer my concern. I hoped they could figure it out and either fix their relationship or face the consequences. I had simply held up a mirror for them to see the cracks in their story. My parents eventually heard from Sarah, who called them in tears. She said she was upset about my speech, felt exposed, and felt that I had humiliated her. She did not apologize for what she did to me. Instead, she made herself the victim. But my parents told her plainly, "You chose to call Ava up there without warning. You can't blame her for telling the truth. And let's not forget, you hurt her first." Sarah apparently went quiet after that. Over time, our family gatherings became complicated. Sometimes Sarah would show up, sometimes she would not. James rarely put in an appearance. I believe they were both ashamed. For me, life moved on. I focused on my own growth, took on new career opportunities, and built healthier relationships with people who genuinely cared for me. The heartbreak left scars, but it also taught me that I cannot rely on the approval of others. I have to love and respect myself. That day at the wedding, standing at the microphone, was my chance to break free from my fear and find my voice. A few months later, I received a long letter from Sarah in the mail. She wrote about her confusion, saying she had always competed with me in her mind. She was jealous that I found someone like James, and she did not think I deserved him. She admitted she started flirting with him to see if she could get his attention. When he responded, she realized she could take him for herself. But as time passed, she felt less sure about her choice. She confessed she did not ever think about how deeply she would hurt me because she was too busy proving a point to herself. She ended the letter by asking me for forgiveness, but still tried to shift some blame, saying, "You were always quiet." I never knew how you felt. I did not reply right away. I needed time to reflect. The damage was done, and trust cannot be rebuilt with a single letter. Yet, I felt pity for her. She had lived her life hungry for validation. She needed constant proof she was the best. But in chasing that, she had pushed me away, broken my heart, and even put her own happiness at risk. I realized that her words, "You'll never be good enough," may have really been about herself, a reflection of her own fears. Eventually, I wrote back. I told her I appreciated her honesty, but that healing would take a long time. I explained I was not entirely ready to forgive. I told her it was not about wanting revenge, but about needing to protect my heart. I wished her well and hoped she found peace. Whether or not she and James stayed together was up to them. I did not want them to fail. I simply wanted them to be honest with each other and themselves. That was all. In truth, I felt a small sense of pride. I had faced the biggest betrayal of my life and emerged stronger. I found my voice, and I used it. When Sarah tried to label me as never good enough, I refused to accept that judgment. My worth was never hers, or James's, to decide. With time, I let go of the bitterness. I realized that focusing on my own growth and happiness was more powerful than holding on to anger. Sometimes, people ask me if I regret giving that speech. They worry it was too dramatic or caused too many problems between Sarah and James. But I don't regret it at all. Sarah invited me to speak, wanting to see me squirm, and I decided to be honest and stand up for myself. Telling the truth is never wrong. If it tore down their facade, that is on them, not me. Today, I share this story as a reminder to anyone who feels overshadowed or betrayed by someone they love. You are enough. You deserve respect and honesty in your relationships. Betrayal is painful, especially when it comes from a loved one. But never let someone else's actions define your worth. The truth is a powerful thing. When you speak it, you free yourself from silent pain. My wedding speech showed me that I could stand in front of a room of people, some of whom judged me, some of whom pitied me, and speak the truth. I would not be silenced by shame or fear. In the end, my sister's betrayal was a catalyst for my growth. Yes, there were moments when my heart felt shattered, when I cried on the bathroom floor, wondering what I did to deserve this. However, those nights taught me resilience. Today, I see life differently. I have learned to value myself, to set boundaries, and to never allow anyone to determine how I feel about myself again. Sarah's words, "You'll never be good enough," once haunted me, but now they no longer hold power. I'm strong, I'm worthy, and I am moving forward. I hope my story encourages you to speak up when someone treats you unfairly. Problems never truly go away if you keep them bottled inside. Sometimes, you have to face the people who hurt you and let them know they no longer control you. You do not have to be cruel or mean. You just have to be honest. And honesty, when spoken from a place of courage, can break years of silence and false narratives. If you are wondering what happened to Sarah and James, I hear from extended family that they are still married, but it is complicated. They do not appear as blissful as they did on that wedding day. I once heard James left his job to recuperate the losses from that risky investment, causing them tension and financial problems. But that is their journey to figure out, not mine. Life goes on for each of us. I choose love and forgiveness for myself, but that does not mean I forget. I simply release the burden of hatred. Hatred weighs us down more than it hurts the other person. The best revenge, if you want to call it that, is living with peace in your heart. That is what I am doing now. I have a steady job, supportive friends, and newfound self-esteem. If I ever decide to love again, I will do so with an open mind, but also a wiser one. Betrayal can teach us to recognize red flags, communicate our needs, and maintain self-respect. And so, that is my story. My sister took my fiancé and said I would never be good enough. But at their wedding, I spoke the truth. She laughed at first, thinking I would make a fool of myself. Yet, by the end, her smile vanished, and she whispered, "How did you know this?" That question remained in my mind for a while, but I now understand that it was the shock of realizing I was not a weak, clueless girl. I was someone who saw more than they realized, someone capable of standing up for herself. Thank you for watching and listening to my story. If you ever find yourself in a similar situation, betrayed by someone you trust, remember that you choose how the story ends. You can let their betrayal destroy you, or you can rise above it, find your voice, and tell your truth. You are stronger than you think, and no one has the power to define you unless you give it to them. In life, we cannot control how others treat us, but we can control our response. We can choose dignity and honesty in the face of cruelty. We can find lessons in the darkest times and allow them to shape us into better, wiser people. That is what I did, and it changed the way I see myself. My sister betrayed me, yes, but in the end, I found the courage I never knew I had. For that, I maintain a sense of peace. And maybe, someday, Sarah will realize that tearing me down never lifted her up. She will learn that only through respect and genuine love can you build a happy life. I hope my words encourage anyone who feels bad about themselves because of someone else's hurtful actions. Let the pain remind you of your strength. Let heartbreak teach you about your true worth. Please remember, if anyone says you are not good enough, you do not have to believe them. Look in the mirror and see your value, your dreams, and your heart. Nobody can take that away from you unless you let them. This is the end of my story. Thank you so much for staying with me until the end. I hope you found something meaningful in it. If you take away one lesson, let it be this. Always be honest with yourself, never lose your dignity, and know that your worth does not depend on someone else's opinion. From this day forward, I plan to live my life with more confidence and trust in my own voice. I hope you do the same. Take care and remember, you are enough, just as you are.